In Israel, extensive preparations are currently underway. Netanyahu has been emphasizing that things will be substantially different after Gaza is resolved. The Israeli government has been working very hard. The Israeli Defense Ministry is getting ready for the war's second month. The Defense Ministry's workforce has been called into action, and they are working non-stop to meet the needs of those who were evacuated from almost 100 communities in the north and vicinity of Gaza during the conflict, repair border areas, and obtain defense supplies, ammunition, and shelters. The ministry is responsible for a wide range of tasks. The ministry reported that ships and freight planes carried more than 3,000 tons of military hardware to Israel. 5 ships and 100 cargo trips were conducted by cargo aircraft. These spacecraft carried systems, equipment, and soldier-use ceramic plates. The Defense Ministry's overarching objective is to support the civilian war effort while giving the Israel Defense Forces and security forces breathing room and functional continuity. At home, the priority is to obtain what Israeli industries have to offer. Amidst all of this planning, Israel delivered a severe blow to Hamas. These are the specifics of the assault. According to the Israel Defense Forces, soldiers and Hamas fighters performing hit-and-run attacks from tunnels engaged in close-quarters fighting. 4 of the schools that were used as shelters, according to the UN, suffered damage in less than a day. The UN issued a warning at the same time about growing water shortages. More than 9,000 Palestinians have died, according to the health ministry headed by Hamas. But Israel does not believe any of the information that Hamas has made public. According to Anawa, a minor died in a shelter at the beach refugee camp that was turned into a school, while at least 20 others perished in a classroom in the Jabalia refugee camp. Reports are confirmed by media sources. A vivid video from a primary school in the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza depicts the events that transpired in the main courtyard and then outside the school's main gate. There are at least 20 dead or injured people on the ground. The second video, which was taken in the main courtyard of a primary school at the beach refugee camp, which is located near the Mediterranean shore but also to the north of Gaza, sparked a media uproar. This was due to the fact that it provided proof of the horrors that had occurred there, for which Gaza's Hamas officials claimed Israeli airstrikes were to blame. As usual, the Israel Defense Forces have not yet provided a statement. Time is running out for the Palestinians in Gaza, who are in grave danger of being wiped out, according to experts chosen by the UN. A humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza has been demanded by the UN. A disastrous tipping point has been reached in the Gaza scenario. There is limited availability of clean drinking water in Gaza due to restrictions on fuel entering the region and a reduction in water supply. That such a human catastrophe is occurring in our century is a shame for all of us. Human life depends on water, and 2 million Gazans currently face difficulties obtaining clean drinking water. Israel's delegation to the UN in Geneva said that all of the fatalities were the result of Hamas. The Israel Defense Forces reported earlier in the day that they had eliminated some 130 Hamas fighters. According to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the soldiers were fighting at full strength. Netanyahu declared, "We have crossed the outskirts of Gaza City and achieved impressive achievements. We're moving forward." President Biden stated that a significant number of foreign nationals were able to exit Gaza following the opening of the Rafah border crossing with Egypt for a second day. Among them were around 70 Americans, but, according to the medical nonprofit Doctors Without Borders, over 20,000 injured people are still stranded in the region. In the meantime, the Hezbollah organization in Lebanon declared that it was launching simultaneous attacks against 19 sites in Israel, claiming that this would be the group's most powerful assault on the country yet. The Israeli army retaliated by hitting several Hezbollah locations in Lebanon. This occurs the day before Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, is scheduled to give a much-awaited speech. However, Israel has a lot of smaller defense industries in addition to its 3 main defense companies, Elbit Systems and Rafael IAI. There are other factors as well, like buying vegetables and uniforms from Israeli businesses. The total cost of this project is in the billions of shekels. The United States is considering providing Israel with roughly $10 billion in financial aid throughout the conflict. The ministry has so far disclosed a budget of 3 billion new Israeli shekels, enough to support 57,000 jobs across 651 factories. It has been established that 8,500 vehicles, 4,000 buses, 2,000 trucks, and other mobile vehicles have all been fully paid for. In border villages like those that Hamas attacked near Gaza, repairs are being carried out by construction companies as well. Moreover, the provision of defense shelters and other areas is mandatory. Furthermore, the ministry is getting ready for the 31st Remembrance of the Martyrs. Among the dead are 394 members of the security forces, including 58 police officers and Shin Bet agents, who were slain during the fighting. Many of these men were declared inactive on October 7th. We attended dozens of funerals every week during the first week, and it took some time to bury them all. The number of deaths is so great that 146 distinct cemeteries contain the tombs of the martyrs. Furthermore, 712 Israel Defense Forces troops have had their official status disabled due to injuries received. On the first day of treatment, thousands of people were injured during the October 7th Hamas massacre. While several people were released from the hospital, a large number of patients with serious injuries remained there. Furthermore, 359 hotels and guest houses are currently housing 125,000 people who were compelled to escape their homes in almost 100 different locations, including the cities of Sderot and Kiryat Shmona. Israel has made repeated references to the overarching goal of this conflict, winning. But the goal at hand, which is to get the economy ready for some kind of total war, is a big one. Positively, Israel has a sizable military industry and the domestic capacity to support it. As a result of the states and the Zionist movement's collaboration to accomplish these goals over the previous century. The officials claim that the ministry is open 24 hours a day. Israel is investing in specialized military equipment at this time. Artificial intelligence and state-of-the-art technology are used in this. In addition to investing in more anti-drone equipment, Israel has already started making investments in further unmanned systems, including robots, drones, and a range of other technology that can help form drone swarms and leverage artificial intelligence. All of these actions taken by the ministry show how capable the country is and how quickly it can transition to an economy focused on war. However, a protracted conflict will present several challenges, such as the need to mobilize a large number of reservists and force a large number of civilians to flee their borders. Furthermore, every plan will run into problems as soon as it makes contact with the enemy. The techniques that have been established over the previous few decades require a learning curve, and Israel has no communication with its foe. The motivation behind the clandestine operation against the Hammers in Jabalia was revealed today. The most important Hamas facility was exposed by the operation's success. After the crucial operation, there were loud explosions that could be heard as documents were taken. Breaking news keeps coming in. Numerous reports claim that this process has ruined the Northern Line. The state of affairs in the area is dire. Israeli fighter jets and assault helicopters were sent for the crucial task after the blockade was lifted. The coastline strip was most recently the target of the most serious attack. On the eastern shore, the southern and northern lines are supposed to cross. The attack moved to the south once most of the tunnels in the Gaza Strip were revealed. The first land operation in the south started when it was observed that Israeli soldiers were moving back toward the southern line. 3 locations are planning large-scale attacks. In the meantime, Hezbollah in Lebanon's south, in the Gaza Strip, and in the West Bank has been incentivized by the terrorist group Hamas's severe defeats. The shooting never stopped. Now, without further ado, let's discuss the shocking revelation. First and foremost, in my last video, I discussed the COVID operation that Israeli special forces conducted against Hamas. The operation resulted in the confiscation of numerous confidential documents and maps related to the terrorist organization. The operation started early today when the Israeli army deployed a large number of fighter jets to seize the materials. Bunker-busting ammo was discovered to be armed with the jets. The justification for the use of this ammunition was made public in a short amount of time as a result of the examination of the records and maps made public yesterday. As the Israeli ground forces approached, two significant Hamas tunnels were reportedly discovered connecting the Jabalia Beri Hanun areas. The activation of the jets caused a significant number of Hamas fighters to emerge from the tunnels and begin fire. Israeli tanks moved closer to the open tunnels. Following the aircraft's initial sortie, the locations of the tunnels were ascertained, and numerous terrorists surfaced from them during this operation. Massive explosions were produced when the second sortie struck the tunnel line for 2 kilometers. The majority of the main tunnel was found to have collapsed as a consequence of the images that were gathered. At least 40 Hamas fighters were killed in the major tunnel collapse, according to unofficial reports. It is expected that a large-scale ground operation will start at any moment. At the moment, Israeli forces are positioned near the border with Hanun. The next target will be Jabalia if Bey Hanun falls soon. But as Israeli forces ended the siege, a tremendous mobilization started on the Western Front. The fighting was said to be escalating along a 3-kilometer stretch of coastline because, should Israel seize this territory, the Israeli army would encircle the northern Gaza Strip. Israeli forces launched the biggest airstrike of the time at this point, affecting an area of 3 kilometers. Initially, it was stated that the 36 attacks against Hamas targets in the Gaza Strip had been executed and that planes had been called into action. It was also mentioned that 2 locations in the area had been identified as Hamas gathering spots. For the first time, Israeli combat helicopters reached the coastal strip. 3 assault helicopters are said to have destroyed 2 assembly centers, 2 ammunition dumps, and 1 Hamas tunnel entry throughout this procedure. I think the Israeli army will move during the day. A massive land operation will be planned to link the northern and southern lines together if all of the targets are taken out. After this process, Gaza will be surrounded on all 4 sides, which will make it very difficult for the terrorist group Hamas to carry out its operations. The 3 kilometers indicated on the map were the only openings in the Gaza Strip at the time. Israeli warships have blocked the sea line, but as I have said before, I think the shoreline is the only area of entry. Following this procedure, Hamas will progressively lose power, and its defenses will break down. All shipments will be stopped due to the siege. The Israeli army will move quickly and cautiously with the goal of completely eliminating the now broken Hamas organization. The Israeli army must move slowly and methodically as it waits for Hamas to put an end to their resistance. This is due to the fact that militants have set up traps all across Gaza, and there are reportedly still hundreds of tunnels there. The operation will be much simpler if the militants are compelled to leave these tunnels if they find themselves in a sticky situation. Nevertheless, it was found that the southern Gaza Strip was where the ground operation initially started. I'd like to make it clear that we track and assess up-to-date and accurate news for you before moving on to the most important news of the day. In addition to real-time reporting from military public information systems, we also disseminate news from over 100 letters we receive in the region. We labor more than 15 hours a day, which is another crucial point to remember. To assist us, kindly click the Super Thank You button to make a donation. You may also show your support and like our video by leaving a comment. We will be able to inspire ourselves, reach more people, and work harder with your help. We'll return to the major subject of the day now. According to the Israel Defense Forces, personnel from the armored and engineering divisions took part in an operation in the southern Gaza Strip. The Israel Defense Forces armored and engineering units carried out a targeted operation in the southern Gaza Strip overnight, according to the statement, in order to inspect houses and remove explosives. The military discovered an enormous tunnel full of unmanned aerial vehicles during the mission. As a group of Israeli army soldiers approached the tunnel, unmanned aerial aircraft informed them that it was surrounded by mines. Throughout this process, orders for further unmanned aerial vehicles to intervene were received, and 3 of them advanced toward the tunnel line. Bunker penetration rapidly targeted the tunnel's entry portion. During the initial strike, there were explosions of gunfire all around the tunnel, and militants connected to the Hamas movement were observed moving close by. After a brief altercation in the neighborhood, the terrorists were neutralized, and the militants started firing. There were claims that the operation killed 25 terrorists and that more tunnels had been found nearby. But as said earlier, the area surrounding the tunnel needs to be cleared of mines first. In strategic locations, militants have been known to plant mines. An additional crucial piece of information was obtained from the West Bank's Nablus checkpoint. 3 distinct Hamas militants fired upon the Israeli checkpoint close to Nablus. After the initial assault, Israeli forces started preparing a counteroffensive. As more Israeli soldiers were stationed at the checkpoint, the militants started to flee. 18 militants who planned the attack were then taken into custody. An extensive operation revealed that Hezbollah responded to Hamas's significant defeat. The Israeli army reported that Hezbollah launched an anti-tank missile from Lebanon into a military installation close to the northern town of Meitat. The operation didn't do much damage, but Israeli artillery started firing along the border. 6 Israeli jets blasted several locations as artillery units along the Lebanese border targeted Hezbollah. Hezbollah confirmed the deaths of 54 militants. This could be the most important stage of the war. Decisions affect how conflicts turn out. Nowadays, the most common error is rushing. Israeli forces had to advance cautiously and gently. This is a far tougher and more complex conflict than larger and stronger conventional army warfare. Thus, the operation should continue without underestimating terrorist organizations or disturbing their discipline. Although the Gaza Strip is small, there are many traps there. As previously indicated, hundreds more tunnels might be in use. If the closure is lifted, I believe Israeli forces will step up their other operations while cutting back on their activities in Gaza. Because of the fanatics' siege of Gaza, shipments have stopped. It seems that this process drives fighters and resistance organizations out of the tunnels. There are still after-effects from the Israeli army's conflict with Hamas in the Middle East and beyond. Iran poured copious amounts of money into Lebanese Hezbollah, which has been fighting Israelis in northern Israel for decades, while it started to back Hamas in Gaza. Hamas in southern Israel has always been a prop for larger attacks coming from Lebanon into northern Israel. Iran started the Precision Project in Lebanon at the same time as the controversial Beirut Conference in December 2016. The Revolutionary Guards started transferring supplies and scientists from Iran to Lebanon through global black market supply lines. After then, Lebanon and Hezbollah would collaborate to amass massive stockpiles of lethal, long-range precision-guided weapons. Under the codename Project Precision, the goal was to make Hezbollah missiles more destructive and accurate so they could take out important infrastructure hubs and commercial targets close to Israel. When the war between Israel and Hamas broke out, these long-term initiatives took on an entirely new significance. The war between Israel and Hamas is now quickly evolving into a virtual war on the internet. Iran, Russia, and, to a lesser degree, China have denigrated Israel's principal partner, the United States, while supporting Hamas and undermining Israel through state media and the biggest social networking sites globally. Together with extreme organizations like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which were previously in conflict with Hamas, Iran's proxies in Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq have also entered the online debate. Government representatives and independent experts claim that there is an unprecedented volume of propaganda and misinformation available online. This reflects the geopolitical fragmentation of the world. According to Rafi Mendelsohn, vice president of Siabra, a Tel Aviv-based social media intelligence organization, millions or maybe hundreds of millions of people are viewing this globally. And since Hamas invaded Israel from Gaza on October 7th, Siabra has identified at least 40,000 bot, or phony online profiles, and it's likely having an impact on the fight in a similar way. Fears have been raised that the visceral, emotionally charged, politically biased, and frequently false content may spark a wider war because it has stoked rage and even violence outside of Gaza. Although Iran has denied any involvement in the Hamas offensive, Hossein Amir-Abdollahian, the country's foreign minister, has also vowed revenge on other fronts should Israeli forces continue to be present in Gaza. Although the campaigns didn't seem coordinated, American and other government officials and analysts did not rule out cooperation. China, Russia, and Iran, on the other hand, have been promoting the same message since the start of the conflict, although they have distinct reasons for siding with Hamas over Israel. Along with organizing overt and covert information campaigns to promote one another and broaden the global reach of their viewpoints in a variety of languages and platforms, officials and analysts said they have not only offered moral support. For instance, despite reports from independent groups and Western security services, the Iranian president recently replayed a statement describing the explosion that occurred on October 17 at the Al Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza as an Israeli war crime on the Spanish branch of the worldwide Russian television network RT. Analysts have since claimed that a misfired missile from Gaza was the reason behind the explosion. Posts like this one have received tens of thousands of views. Sputnik India, another Russian foreign news agency, quoted a military expert as suggesting, without any proof, that the US delivered the bomb that destroyed the hospital. There's also an ongoing covert information war going on with totalitarian nations. Hamas used a broad and sophisticated media strategy from the outset of the onslaught, drawing inspiration from organizations like Iran. As stated by the researchers at Siabra, by using fake identities from countries like Pakistan, its operatives disseminated sensationalized photos on Facebook and X, evading Hamas's bans. The speed and extent with which Hamas's messaging has proliferated on the internet has astounded authorities and specialists who monitor extremism and disinformation. This achievement was most likely made possible by the emotional intensity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the horrifying images of bloodshed that Hamas gunmen carried cameras to capture in almost real time. Social media sites also magnified large bot networks and soon official government and state media accounts in Iran, Russia, and China. Kyabra discovered that around 1 in 4 accounts sharing content on the incident on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and X were fraudulent within a day of the conflict starting. The experts from the company found 6 coordinated initiatives that were so widespread that they implied the involvement of major non-state entities or governments. Iranian accounts on Facebook and X are disseminating particularly dangerous content that glorifies war crimes and brutality against Israeli citizens and calls for more attacks against Israel. The reports present Ayatollah Ali Khamenei as the head of the pan-Islamic resistance against Israel and the neo-colonialist Western powers, notwithstanding his denials of the country's role in the attack. However, Israel, with its own highly developed information operations, found itself suddenly on the defensive. Speaking anonymously about intelligence-related topics, 2 Israeli government representatives claimed that Israel keeps an eye on bot activity in Iran and other nations. China and Russia, who have been closer in recent years, seem determined to use the crisis to destabilize both Israel and the United States. China's leaders have presented the United States as a cowardly warmonger that has failed strategically in the Middle East, while China has presented itself since the start of the conflict as a neutral peacemaker. State media and official Russian accounts concur on this point. Following October 7, a large number of pro-Kremlin Telegram accounts abruptly stopped posting about the conflict in Ukraine and started posting only about Israel. Mr. Putin, who, after the conflict convened, met with officials of Hamas, he explained that the wars in Israel and Ukraine were part of a larger campaign against American dominance in the world. The leader of Russia asserted, without providing any proof, that the disturbances at an airport in Dagestan, a province in southern Russia with a majority of Muslims, were instigated by Western intelligence services. As we can see, the United States, Russia, Iran, and China are engaged in geostrategic competition and conflict. These nations have intensified their disinformation campaigns and are still using misleading information to inflame tensions globally because they know that entangling Israel, the U.S.'s main Middle Eastern partner, in such a conflict would damage the U.S. Protests around the world are becoming more widespread as a result of the conjecture sparked by false information. Israel and Hamas are still at war with one another in the interim. During his fourth trip to Israel since the conflict began, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken defended Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas. However, he also highlighted the importance of increasing and suspending humanitarian shipments in order to provide access to aid for Palestinian civilians. After Blinken's news conference in Tel Aviv, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced that he would not consider a ceasefire that did not involve the release of the more than 240 hostages that Hamas had been keeping for the past 4 weeks. Blinken's press conference was held in response to Netanyahu's statement. In addition, he voiced his disagreement with the notion that Israel would enable the importation of petroleum products into Gaza via Egypt. Despite this, disagreements between the United States and Israel regarding humanitarian issues are not taken very seriously. Israel acknowledges Biden's domestic political demands, but it does not believe that increasing the amount of humanitarian aid will change the trajectory of the conflict. This is despite the fact that Israel is opposed to increasing aid because it feels that doing so will boost Hamas. Regarding the United States' desire for a humanitarian halt, it seems that this is the widespread consensus among people everywhere. Even if the majority of Israelis are vehemently opposed to any ceasefire until Hamas is defeated, they are equally aware that a halt in fighting for a few hours does not mean that the crisis has been resolved. The administration of Israel believes that there is currently too much at stake to engage in a fight with the coalition of the United States. I am grateful that you noticed.